If you poof me, you'll die too! Together then!
Nobody in the history of the internet has been more well-fed than Bubbling shippers. Like, god damn. Welcome to another wonderful edition of Fiona and Cake going above and beyond all expectations and making me a big fat hypocrite, as I hate franchises that refuse to end. But I'm giving Adventure Time the biggest pass right now. But with something this quality, can you really blame me? Fiona and Cake episodes 7 and 8 were complete back-to-back bangers. From giving us strong enemies to lovers vibes that we've just always wanted, to the exploration of Simon and Betty's love story. Not to mention the Big L himself finally making his return. Fiona herself dealing with some massive depression. So let's break that down in yet another edition of me writing a video on an airplane. So we kick off this batch of episodes with a quick horror segment to get us in the mood, and to remind us that this isn't ye old Adventure Time, something that the show has been doing pretty consistently throughout. In the mirror of the opening of the second episode, we watch a young Marceline avoid the blob mutants alongside Simon. The only difference? He's dead. Yeah, this seems to be a big divergent point for this universe. In this world, Simon never got the crown, or based on his blood-drained corpse, the Vampire King got to him first, leaving Marceline without a legal guardian, leading the young demon child to get swooped up by the first father figure that wasn't her real one, which in this case would turn out to be the Vampire King, who would go on to use the crown to block out the sun, while Marceline would go on to become his right-hand woman, being renamed the Star, maintaining the tarot card theme of his inner circle that we saw in Stakes. Now, curiously, from what we've seen, the Vampire King was immune to the crown's crazy, meaning his vampirism somehow made him immune to its powers, or he was already so crazy that the crown had no effect on him. As based on everything we know about this man, he already had more than a couple screws loose. While he took a cat nap, Marceline acted as the terror of the wasteland, feasting on the populace till there was almost no one alive. PB, on the other hand, was keeping a whole other demographic fed with her apocalypse look. These two have an arch-enemy to nemesis thing going on, with PB refusing any and all ideas that she would hook up with her arch-enemy, which, yeah, she would definitely never let that happen. But even if it's not love, these two are still consuming each other's brain space, so it's basically the same thing. What's not the same though is Fiona. Fresh off of hitting and killing the Winter King, Fiona is in a bit of a low period, as not only did she kill her rebound, but she also murdered like 30 people to get there, which has a way of dampening Fiona's wanderlust, that sense of adventure. Fiona wanted nothing more than to be this, to live that power fantasy that Prismo wrote in his off time. But this isn't a fantasy anymore, with the story at every step injecting just a little bit of realism and consequences to put a damper on things. Cake kills a mouse, cool. But that gets blood on Fiona's shirt, starts attracting flies, and smells awful. Less cool. Fiona thinks she can beat up the bad guys only to get her shit rocked. Yeah, that happened. No matter what she was supposed to be, Fiona isn't getting the chance to live the fantasy that she thought she wanted. With her first real attempt at being an adventurer, of being her original self, saving her damsel, gets undercut by her damsel being an asshole, and her enemies turning out to be victims. Fiona keeps getting dealt a bad hand, leading to her second-guessing herself and what she thinks she's doing. While Finn has the boundless confidence of a man who mostly won all of his battles, Fiona is struggling to get one. She's getting scared of failure, leading her to hesitate when anything dangerous comes along, leading her to get in Cake's way when the cat tries to go grab the crown. This is the perfect contrast. While Fiona can't find her footing, Cake really hits her stride here, murdering the undead with her bare teeth, having finally gotten the hang of her powers. Initially, whenever she changed, things just wouldn't be fully right. She didn't know how to stretch, and even when she did, her forms tended to be lopsided with mismatched eyes, showing her lack of control. But now, she's a beast. Cake thinks she can take on the world, and she's mostly right. But this differing level of confidence leads to the two friends to get each other's way, setting up some resentment for later. But this episode as a whole is a blast. The Vampire AU is simple but divine in its execution, with it littering the plot with a bunch of small ideas that really lean into the AU nature of the series. As we got Mart in this episode, and he's not the worst. With him being there to help out Fiona instead of just throwing her under the bus, with him even getting a chance to interact with a baby Finn, who he immediately becomes attached to, yet he still finds a way to abandon him. Was dying a choice? Probably not, but this is just like what happened in the original show, where he cared for his son until they were unintentionally separated, but hey, maybe he was just nicer in this universe overall. But given his lack of a pulse, the world may never know. Though in other news, we got the AU Huntress Wizard. She's cool. Through it all the fun hijinks, all just the great character work, the piece de resistance of the story was Gary and Marshall attending a fancy party together, where Marshall's mom proves that she is just as much of a self-important asshole as Hudson was. As it turns out, Marshall did in fact call his mom to snag the Lemon Thought's numbers, only for her to turn around and immediately leverage that against her son to join the family business. Now I feel like if Marshall was on his own, he would have just dipped, but since he's with Gary, who he is very much in love with, Marshall's willing to sacrifice the future he wants to make sure Gary gets his, with Gary finally being in the room where it happens and with people who happen to have a lot of money, giving him the chance to finally get his bakery. But after seeing what Marshall was gonna give up, Gary burnt all the bridges, pulling the ultimate power move by telling the Trouble Kid's mom she's awful, and the two run away to start making out in the elevator. This, while brief, was everything. It's fun, it's cute, and it ties the story to the rest of the real world, as we see how the events in Fiona and Cake's universe reflect the ones that are going on outside. As when Simon goes to Winterworld, it starts to snow in Fiona's, reflecting the cold environment that Simon now found himself in. This is way more explicit here, as while Simon is trying to avoid vampires, Marshall's mom is now running a blood bank party in a tower so gothic even Dracula would throw side-eye. What Simon sees and experiences is reflected in the world of Fiona and Cakes. This was hinted at as early as episode 1, as we saw how Fiona would listen to Cheers every morning and was unable to change the channel, as Cheers was what Simon was listening to. So for Simon to be in this vampire dimension where he wasn't around to protect Marceline, who he explicitly states he raised like his own, that would bring up feelings of parental issues and feel like he may have failed his daughter, which would bleed into the other world by forcing Marshall to fall in with his negative parental figure, only for a part of him to call it out just like he did with the Vampire King. So while this may feel like fluff at first, and a chance to throw in even more Easter eggs at us, I feel like this is a great way to show how the two worlds are interconnected, and to make explicit what the show has pretty heavily been hinting at. Not to mention how this all ties back into the idea of fanfic, and how people process their feelings via storytelling, and how even if it's just a reskin of something that they know, it can still be just as valuable and impactful to the person experiencing it. Or this could just be me making excuses because my ship happened. Yes I am. But the episode is great, so you really can't complain. Which brings us to the next episode, where things go from bad to worse for everybody. First, let's talk about the Scarab. This man is not doing great, with us getting a better look at where he fits into the multiverse, and how despite his plans to kill Simon, you kinda start to feel sorry for the guy. As we discover, the man is a tight ass. He's a stickler for the rules, leading everyone around him to think he's uptight, leading everyone around him to not really care for him, or not really appreciate him like they do with Prismo, who regularly threw parties that he wasn't invited to. The whole multiverse and everyone here are more like Prismo than they are him. But more than just Prismo, the rest of the cosmic hierarchy seems to lean way more towards Prismo's side of things than the Scarab's, with his boss being a dude bro who is willing to give Prismo a pass on his illegal dimension, not to mention the slacking, but drags Scarab to his office to tell him to go back to doing his job, with the main difference here in the situation being likability. People like Prismo, so the ball man is willing to let it go. But the Scarab, he's kind of a narc, so he's getting shafted and being held to a different standard. This explains a lot of why the Scarab resents Prismo. He's a rules guy, and he always does his job, but has zero friends, while Prismo gets to be a little bit sloppy, but loved by all. I feel like this is the source of Scarab's resentment, and I think it does a really good job at grounding his issues with Prismo to be way more petty and less apocalyptic than a man wanting all the power for the sake of it. It makes him feel more real and like somebody that we all know. Though we don't know how the big boss of the gang is gonna feel about any of this, but seeing as they're helping out the Scarab, something needs to be done about this situation, and we're just gonna have to see how that pans out. Though for as much sympathy as this episode gives me for the man, he's proven here that he is just as bad as Prismo, as he's also ignoring his job to focus on a passion project. Speaking of passion, Betty. Now we finally get to see how Betty and Simon fell in love for the first time, with it lining up and adding to a lot of the details that we've already gotten, from the two meeting via a library book mishap to Betty giving up a trip to be with the love of her life, with Simon not recognizing that maybe, just maybe, she's hard carrying him at the expense of her own dreams and goals. They're cute, don't get me wrong. I'm with Fiona that this is all adorable. You can tell from Fiona assuming that Simon left with Betty that some bomb is about to drop on Simon where he has to reconcile how he may have let her give up too much for his sake, being too blind by their love to not recognize that they accidentally made everything about him. But that bomb is for next week, and the video I'm in the process of making, because of course I am, and I'm rewriting it as the second episode came out and destroyed my original one. They are soulmates though, and this is just a sweet nectar I needed to balance out how cold and dead this new universe is. As yeah, everyone's dead. This appears to be the universe that the Lich created when he made his wish to kill all life. As yeah, everyone is dead. It happened in an instant, as we see the Ice King go from alive to skeleton in just one frame of his video. But while everyone may be gone, BMO is still here, thank God. Never mind. BMO is great here though. They bring such a sad, fun joy to a world that feels dry and devoid of life, with everyone else being bummed out by something. Them dying was horrific, and I love that. But back to the issues, Fiona is finally at rock bottom as she defends her decision to run away, rather than try and let Cake steal the crown. Not to mention her questioning her actions, she finally got a look at what Simon will turn into when he gets a crown, and having just killed all the people, she's no longer willing to sacrifice anyone else on her account. Hiding the fact that she discovered a crown, she tries to argue that maybe the best, least damaging option would be for Fiona and Cake to go back to their world as is, while Simon gets to stay himself. While this would allow Fiona to avoid making any real sacrifices, avoiding a hard choice, Cake rightfully points out that she'd be sacrificing a hell of a lot more than Fiona. She's allowed to be her true shape-changing self. Not a voiceless cat, Cake doesn't want to go back to being that. Meanwhile, Simon is still more than willing to sacrifice himself, so Fiona ends up just having to fold, so together Fiona and Cake jump inside his head and back to their old world, with Simon being left at the mercy of the Scarab, only for Gold Betty to step in and finally bring Simon to her courtesy of the Lich, who yes, is here, and acting a little bit different than normal. And it both does and doesn't make sense. As we saw at Prismo's party, the Lich is basically a machine. His only directive is to kill all life, and without anything to kill, he just kinda shuts down. But even then, things are a little bit different than they were before. Where previously, he leapt at the chance to go kill another universe, to kill Prismo and to continue his spree of just destroying all life. But here, when he sees Simon and the gang, he doesn't get any fresh new purpose. He just lets them live. And what's crazier, he doesn't take the opportunity to jump into a new dimension to start killing people all over again. He just sits there, menacingly. Now to me, this reeks of the Lich being under new management. He is the last scholar of Gold. Allegedly, he serves its will and mission of bringing chaos and atrophy to the universe on a massive scale. But since Betty took that thing over, perhaps now he has a new mission. One that is less genocidal and just nothing. My theory here is that the Lich succeeded in wiping out this universe, but then Gold and Betty fused. And afterwards, she might have told the Lich to just chill the f out, as he claims to be different now. He's not the me of old. So rather than killing everybody, he's just there, waiting for nothing without a purpose. So even when a new opportunity presents itself, he doesn't take it. However, we do know from Together Again that the Lich's hands is still on the move. It was still trying to end all things. So perhaps this isn't kill all life, or perhaps Gold Betty is protecting Simon specifically, that she won't allow the Lich to hurt her love. As we do see that there is still some kind of active connection, being able to see through his eyes that Simon was in trouble and rescues him at the last second. This does raise questions of why she didn't act sooner, which maybe aside from her being Cthulhu and just being a whole different level of being that couldn't be with him anymore, Betty might be very limited on what she can do, as her wish didn't change the nature of Gold, but she was able to bend its power to grant her a wish to save Simon. So while she may not have been able to change the monster's nature, her wish may allow her to act in certain circumstances where Simon's life is in danger, such as deactivating the Lich or teleporting Simon away when he's inches away from almost being separated from his neck. It's fascinating, it's curious, and I cannot wait for the next episode to come out. These last two episodes were great from start to finish, with lots of deep cuts and the perfect type of fan service, as it serves the plot just as much as it does the fans. I'm very curious to see how Simon's confrontation with Betty will go, if he'll choose madness or just see how much closure he'll get with Betty. But more than anything else, I gotta know what's gonna happen inside his head, as meeting Betty is gonna bring up a lot of old emotions, and we don't know how Fiona's world is gonna react. Not to mention the Chekhov's gun that is Fiona and Cake's normalization touch that we just keep seeing. Which, cards on the table, it'd be a big swing and could potentially ruin the whole lesson about Simon learning to let go. I'm curious if Fiona's powers might be able to work on Gold Betty, as we know it can strip magic out of magical beings before leaving the person normal. So if Fiona or Cake touch Gold Betty, there's a chance they might be able to bring Betty back. Maybe temporary, but to give the Starcrust lovers just enough time to talk. This isn't certain, as Fiona's powers are based on Prismo's magic, which has been stated multiple times that Gulb's powers trump his own. But given the glitchy nature of Fiona's existence, this might be the only shot Simon has to talk to Betty one last time. Also, it's a little weird that Fiona glitches BMO to a regular alarm clock, and nobody comments on it. Like, times before it was subtle, but this one was in plain view. But we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you all for watching, this has been Sarcasticourse. Like, share, and subscribe to be kept up to date on all my Adventure Time nonsense. Not sure if I'll do a normal video next week, might just do one where I talk about the show as a whole, but depending on how big the next one is, we'll just see how the mood strikes me. As I also have a shipping video to do, it's gonna be a lot, but that just means there's gonna be more for all of you to enjoy. Peace out, love you all.